Hey there, and welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The state Senate in Montana has introduced an amendment to their restrictive municipal broadband bill that doesn't seem to change much, although maybe it does. Be right back. Thanks for joining me, Rick Uzzi here with Broadband Deployment News from Zcorum. So I saw this come through, and I thought it was interesting because Montana has a fairly restrictive code as far as broadband goes. They don't allow it. In fact, this is the current law that I was going to show here first. So this, you see here, government competition with private internet service providers is prohibited, except with a few exceptions. You see here, government competition with private internet services prohibited, exception, same thing there. So no private internet services providers available within the jurisdiction. So you can be, if you're a municipality, you can provide service if there's no internet service provider available within the jurisdiction. Well, a lot of municipalities or towns or whatever, they generally have an internet service provider. Now, it may not be the best. Could be just a fixed wireless provider, and it could be speeds are, it could be DSL. It could be speeds are less than 25 by 3, even 10 megabits per second or something like that. So that's pretty restrictive because that just means if there's any old internet service provider there that that the city can't get into the business. So, and of course, as we're looking at this, we need to be thinking about the fact that we've got BEAD funding that's going to be available, and specifically within the notice of funding opportunity, if a state is going to take money, they cannot restrict anybody from being able to provide that service, including a municipality or an electric membership co-op, or rural electric co-op, as they call them. So I don't know how that's all going to play with this bill that they have in place, but there's an amendment that they put forward that, again, doesn't seem to change much, except there is one thing that I think they may be working towards. So we'll take a look at that. So you see here, again, no private internet service providers available in the jurisdiction. That's one exception. The agency or political subdivision provided services prior to July 1st, 2001. So I guess if you've provided service back in the very, very, very early days of internet, not that early, that's not like 1995, but I mean, seriously, 2001, that's a long time ago. If it was prior to that, then you would be grandfathered in. Now, there is one provider that started up in 2015, this Yellowstone Fiber. I think it was 2015, and you see here, yeah. So it's formerly Bozeman Fiber, a nonprofit fiber provider for Gallatin County. We started as a nonprofit back in 2015 to serve as a school district. We became commercially operational, began operating as an open access network to increase competition. So they have different providers on the network. You see here, they currently have 4 ISPs to choose from: GlobalNet, Hoplite Industries, Skynet, and XMission. So they are an open access network, but it's after 2001, but nobody's told them to shut down, I guess, at this point, because this law has been in place. And that may be, again, due to the fact that it's an open access network, and they've got, they're not really competing, so to speak, with private internet providers. Maybe there weren't any, could be there were none at the time. And they've got, they built the infrastructure or had the infrastructure, not for profit, and then allowed others to use that infrastructure in an open access network. So let's see. The agency or political subdivision shall notify its subscribers within 30 days of the intent of the private internet service provider to begin providing internet services, and may choose to discontinue providing internet services within 180 days of notice. In other words, if somebody stepped into an area like where this Yellowstone Fiber is and said, hey, we want to provide internet service on our own network, Yellowstone Fiber would actually have to, assuming that it's associated with the municipality or the county, would have to notify their customers, hey, there's another internet provider coming in town, just in case you want to know. And then they can choose whether they want to shut down. I don't know why anybody would do that if they put all this investment in the infrastructure, but they can make the choice to discontinue the service within 180 days of notice and tell people, hey, you know what? There's somebody else in town. There's a new sheriff in town, and you guys can sign up with them, and we'll be shutting down in 180 days. If they're offering electronic government services to the general public, not really so much internet. If they're acquiring access to the internet from a private internet service provider, that's okay. Providing funding for broadband service infrastructure projects. So it does say that they can provide funding. So if they do get funding from ARPA or from BEAD or something like that, they can provide that funding. And it says here, consistent with the provisions of Chapter 401. So this is part of the part that was updated in this amendment to make this more clear as to what they can do with those funds. So again, a lot of this flies in the face of the BEAD funding and the NOFO because you're not supposed to restrict or have any restrictions on a municipality if they want to provide the service themselves. But we'll take a look at the changes. Well, before I do that, so there was a law that was put forward in 2021 in Montana that was going to make a change here, but you can see here, never made out of committee, and you can see it's probably dead. I think it's definitely dead at this point. And if I scroll down here, you see the last thing that happened was it died in the process. So it looks like that never got out of committee. This is the text of that. So yeah, this was in 2021. An act allowing municipalities to own and operate municipal broadband systems under certain circumstances, allowing a political subdivision to invest in broadband infrastructure. So it wasn't so much talking about, it does say own and operate, and under certain circumstances, allowing them to invest in broadband infrastructure. A lot of this is the same that we were just looking at as far as their exceptions. No private internet service provider can be providing service, has to be prior to July 1st if they are, those kinds of things. And then really what was added here, and this was again the 2021 bill that died in committee, investing in infrastructure to improve, construct, extend, expand, or maintain internet service as determined appropriate by the political subdivision. Investment in infrastructure allowed in this subsection may be, and then it gives these two reasons or two ways that they can use this, in cooperation with a private internet service provider or provided through an agreement or contract with a private internet service provider. So it sounds like this was really just opening it up to be where the municipality could participate in a public-private partnership or an open access network like they're doing near Bozeman there. Because it doesn't say that they can actually get in the business and compete and provide the retail service themselves, but yet this died in committee. So the new amendment that's out now, so again, this is 2023 in the next legislative section. Again, this looks very similar to the current law with just a couple of small changes. And this is an act for allowing an agency or political subdivision to provide funding for broadband infrastructure projects. And it's amending that same section we we're just looking at. Government competition with private internet service providers prohibited. Exceptions, same thing as we were just reading. So again, this doesn't really change much in the law. Again, you've got the fact that nobody can be providing service there. It can't be prior to 2001, et cetera. None of this has changed. So here's the part that changed. So it says providing funding, and the other, prior to this, it said providing funding for broadband service infrastructure projects. So that's how it reads in the current law, but they're changing it to say providing funding to private broadband service providers for broadband service infrastructure projects. So this would be even more defined on who can they provide the funding to. Well, it's going to be private broadband service providers. So it kind of clarifies that that's where the service would go. It would not go to a city, another city or anything like that. It's got to be a private broadband service provider. And then it says providing network infrastructure within the contiguous campus of the agency or political subdivision. So to me, what I'm reading there is that if they need to provide internet for their own purposes within their campus of the agency or political subdivision, that could be the whole city or the whole county or whatever that political subdivision is, they can build or provide that network infrastructure. So I'm wondering if this is kind of a way to get back to the bill that they were trying to pass in 2021, which I don't know why it didn't pass, where they can build this infrastructure and own this infrastructure and provide it to as a public-private partnership with some other entity or an open access network. So they can provide the network infrastructure within their political subdivision. So they can build a fiber network and provide the infrastructure. They can't necessarily compete or operate with private internet service providers, but they can partner with one, or they could provide an open access network where internet service providers can come in and ride their infrastructure. Maybe that's what this is. Because other than that, it didn't seem to change anything other than to clarify this one part, providing funding. So they can take BEAD money, for example, and they can provide funding. I think they could have done that under the old law. This was just not that defined. But they can provide network infrastructure in there. So it's not quite as clear as this one was, where it talks about in cooperation with a private internet provider or through an agreement with a private internet provider. Maybe that one was too explicit and they're thinking if we don't put that in there, maybe this can get passed. I don't know. I don't know why this would be put forward. So the first one was a House bill. This is a Senate bill. Yeah, so we'll see if this makes it out of committee. And I don't see why it wouldn't, because again, if there's an internet service, if there's not an internet service provider in the city should be able to certainly to provide internet services, and at the very least be able to partner with private internet providers that want to do that. So again, I just thought this was interesting because Montana has some of the more restrictive laws in the country as far as municipal broadband, and the fact that they are modifying their law, but not really modifying it to make it any easier for them to be able to allow a municipality to get in the business is kind of weird right now, I think, because again, the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, says that they have to do that if they're going to get any grants. So they cannot restrict who gets access to the funds. Now, obviously, they can do their due diligence and make sure that the city has the, city or other not-for-profit would have the technical ability to do that, those kinds of things. But they're supposed to allow everybody to come to the table and be able to do this. And certainly the Notice of Funding Opportunity in the Biden administration would really favor municipalities and other not-for-profits because it can help bring prices down and it provides that competition. Now, obviously, you can't get BEAD money if there already is good service there. So again, if it's a municipality, they might, every municipality is going to have some kind of internet. It just might not be good internet. Again, it could be slow fixed wireless, it could be slow cable, slow DSL that's not been, old infrastructure that's not been upgraded. And that right there locks a municipality out, but they can get funding for those areas if that's considered unserved. And if they do get funding for those areas, they are supposed to allow the municipality to be able to do the service on their own and not necessarily have to do it through an open access or public-private partnership. So we'll see how all this flies. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. Thanks for joining me. If this was interesting, if you found it interesting, if you give me a thumbs up, I'd appreciate it on the video. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, click the bell to be notified when I'm live. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.